So in today's video, we are going to be covering what exactly an ETF or exchange traded fund is. So one of the very first rules of investing is that you should always understand what you're investing in. So if you don't know what an ETF is, but you're interested in starting to invest in them, then this is the video for you. In this video, I'll explain exactly what an ETF is and the benefits or pros of investing in an exchange traded fund. I'll also then further on in the video go through some of the ETFs that I am personally invested in myself and give you some details around those too. The ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund. Now, what exactly is that? It is a fund that is traded on a stock exchange. An ETF is a basket of different stocks that tracks a specific industry or sector. So let's look first of all at the S&P 500 as an example. So say for example, you're just starting out to invest and you want to invest in the US stock market, but you don't have the confidence to be going ahead and buying individual stocks and shares. You also don't have enough money to be going and buying a $200 share of Apple. So you want an easier, more simple way of getting stuck into the US market. So an ETF might be a good choice for you. Let's dig a little bit deeper into an S&P 500 ETF. So the example that I'm going to use here is from Vanguard's VUSA. So that is an ETF that tracks the top 500 companies in the US. So when you are investing in that ETF, you're getting a little slice of all of the top 500 companies in the US. So you're not having to go out and individually buy a little bit of each of those companies. You're getting a big, diverse portfolio of those US stocks. Talking through Vanguard's VUSA because it is one of the most popular ETFs for the S&P 500, and it is one that I hold myself at the moment. So currently in this ETF, there are actually 506 different stocks. So let's go through those top 6 stocks that are held within this ETF. So we've got Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Nvidia, Alphabet and Meta platforms. But on top of that, you're getting the rest of the 500 stocks that make up those top US companies. So you're making one investment and you're getting 506 different US stocks within that. So other companies that fall into this ETF are companies like Tesla or Berkshire Hathaway. So there are 4 main benefits of investing in an ETF rather than going ahead and investing in individual stocks and shares or investing in, say, for example, an actively managed fund. So the first and probably one of the most important benefits of investing in an ETF is that they are very, very low cost. Now, fees are really, really important to consider when you're starting to invest because over time they really do eat into any profits that you're going to make through investing. So you do tend to have very, very low fees for ETFs. So as I was giving you that example of the S&P 500, the Vanguard VUSA one, the fees for that are just 0.07%, which is very cheap. Whereas if you were looking to invest in, say, for example, an actively managed fund, you might be looking at fees of more like 1%. So the next thing that's really, really good about them is that they are very diverse, obviously. So with that S&P 500 example that I gave you, you have got 506 different stocks. By just buying that one single investment, you've got all of those stocks. You could also look at investing in something like a world ETF. So where you're investing in stocks throughout the whole world rather than focusing simply on the US market. So you can build a very diverse portfolio without having to put much effort into it. The next positive is that they are passively managed. So as I said, they're not actively managed by a fund manager, which means that they can be much, much cheaper. So the next thing that's really positive with investing in ETFs is that you don't have to have a lot of money to get started. So if you are just starting out with your investing journey and you want to invest a few pounds, you can do that rather than, say, for example, having to go out and buy a single stock of, say, Apple for $200. So that is a positive. You're getting all of those different investments and you don't have to have a lot of money to get started. So where do you buy ETFs or exchange traded funds? I personally buy them on my different investment platforms, and the ETFs that I tend to talk about on this channel are very widely available. So I personally buy these ETFs in my self-invested personal pension, so my SIP, and I also buy them in my investment ISA just because there are tax benefits to buying them in there, but you can just buy them on a standard trading account as well. Okay, so as I said earlier, you can invest in ETFs across different countries, regions, and sectors as well. So I'm going to give you some examples now of some of the ETFs that I am invested in. Now, what I want you to do is go away and do all your own research and find ETFs or exchange traded funds that you feel confident in investing in that are right for your needs. But I wanted to give you some examples of the ones I'm invested in, just so I could talk you through them and you could get a real feel for them, and then you can go away and do your own research and decide which investments are best for you. So the first one is Vanguard's Visa, which we've covered off in more detail earlier in this video, but the fees for this are just 0.07% and the 5-year annualized returns are 15.31%. So when I'm talking about 5-year annualized returns, I'm taking a block of time of 5 years and then averaging out on average each year how has this performed. So Vanguard's Visa, which is the S&P 500 ETF, has made on average 15.31% every year for the last 5 years. Yeah. Now moving on, if you wanted to get more specific, say for example you wanted an ETF that focused on the information technology sector because you'd done your research and you felt like the technology sector was something you wanted to invest in, you can further drill down the S&P 500 to take the tech stocks out of that, and an ETF has been made for that. So the one I'm personally invested in is IITU. Now that is the iShares S&P 500 information technology sector. So as I said, you can put certain filters on ETFs so that they're filtered down into specific sectors, and this is an information technology sector ETF. So the 5-year annualized returns for this individual ETF are 27.51%. So on average, every year for the last 5 years, it's brought in 27.51%. Now, obviously, throughout those 5 years, there have been peaks and troughs. This is averaging it out. And the fee for this ETF is nice and low at 0.15%. So one of the next benefits we talked about with exchange traded funds is the fact that you can have a very diverse portfolio. So let's say we want to take it right out and we want to invest in the whole world. So the ETF that I personally invest in that's a world ETF is the iShares Core MSCI World UCITS ETF. Now the code for that is SWDA. The fees are nice and low at 0.2%, and the 5-year annualized return for this ETF is 12.59%. But as I said, you're getting a very diverse world portfolio. So with this ETF, you're not just getting exposure to the US, you're getting exposure to Europe, Japan, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australasia, and Asia. And there are currently 1,483 equity holdings within this ETF. So you are getting a huge amount of individual investments within this single ETF. So as I mentioned, certain ETFs can be screened for things or filtered for certain aspects. So for example, I wanted to invest in an ETF that was more socially responsible, and the one that I ended up selecting was the iShares MSCI USA SRI ETF. So the code for this is SUUS. The fee for this is just 0.2%, and 5-year annualized returns are actually higher than the S&P 500, so 16.42%. And finally, very quickly, I wanted to give you an example of a thematic ETF. So you can have ETFs that track certain sectors or themes, and the code for this one is BATG, and it is the LNG Battery Value Chain ETF. So this provides exposure to companies that produce metals that are primarily used for manufacturing batteries. So a very specific ETF here. Now the fee for this is slightly higher than the rest at 0.49%, and you will find that if you're looking at specific thematic ETFs, you might be looking at slightly higher fees, but 0.49% is still a fee that I was comfortable with. But please do always check the fees for any ETF investments or any investments on the whole. The 5-year annualized returns for this investment are 15.55%. So really strong returns, and also added a nice level of diversity to my portfolio. So that is my rundown of exactly what an exchange traded fund is. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Let me know if you have any questions about ETFs or investing as a whole in the comments down below, and I really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.